Hello and welcome to this special program. The recent very sharp sell-off in software stocks reflects a rapid shift in investor sentiment rather than a sudden deterioration in fundamentals. The IT index has sold off about 14% here in India in the last 7 trading sessions. The sell-off began in global software names, US-based companies like Cognizant, Accenture, Globant, EPAM, etc., which have also sold off really hard. Over the past several weeks, announcements around new agent orchestration platforms, Claude Cowork, OpenAI's Frontier, have created a powerful narrative that horizontal AI layers will coordinate company workflows, enterprise workflows, automate complex tasks, and ultimately capture a disproportionate share of software budgets. That's the basic core worry here. The concern is that if AI agents become the primary interface for executing work, traditional platforms could be relegated to kind of passive data stores with pricing power and strategic relevance migrating elsewhere. That narrative has contributed to aggressive multiple, that is P multiple compression across software companies, often with little regard for differences in business model, end markets, or actual AI execution. And add to the barrage of articles on social media platforms telling us how the world as we know it has ended. Well, too dramatic? I think so too. But one thing is absolutely clear. Things are changing. The pace of change is perhaps the only question. My guest today is a rare full-stack visionary in the world of technology. Dr. Vishal Sikka doesn't need an introduction. He's not just an observer of the AI revolution. He helped build some of the foundations of this revolution, which is at our doorsteps today. From, of course, pioneering the SAP HANA in-memory platform to serving as the first non-founder CEO of Infosys, he spent his career preparing the enterprise world for the so-called timeless software era. He's, of course, now the founder and CEO of VNI Systems, where he's solving the hallucination problem for the world's largest companies. Dr. Sikka, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Really appreciate your time here.
It's a pleasure, Prashant.
Sorry for that long preamble, sir. Let me get straight to it.
No, it's okay.
You ran one of the largest IT services companies in India. Given what is happening in the US and all these technologies, is the Indian IT services business model prepared for this?
I think if you look at the application of generative AI to knowledge work, this disruption is real, it is here. And in a broad strokes, you could say that all kinds of repetitive, knowledge work that we do can now be done using generative AI a lot more productively. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind a few important things. So in principle, that message is clear. It is real. This disruption is here. Like you said, it is on our doorsteps. But we have to keep in mind a few additional things. First of all, things are always slower than we expect. Adoption takes time. Enterprises are very complex. They are like countries. Large companies are like civilizations. Some of them have been around for hundreds of years, if not decades. I'll give you an example of Waymo, for example. In 2006. At Stanford, we had built a car which, drove autonomously and won the DARPA Autonomous Driving Challenge. That was in 2006. That was 20 years ago. Sebastian Thrun, a dear friend of mine, built that. And now we have Waymo. Last year, Waymo did 15 million rides, but 15 million rides is less than 1% of all the taxi-type rides just in the US. So it takes a long time and even in terms of autonomy, there is a lot of still advancements to happen. Similarly, in the services industry, there are dozens of service lines. AI's impact on those service lines is not all uniform. It is not, doesn't happen overnight to all of them. Some systems are much more complex than others. And so the rate of change is always as slow as the slowest pipe in the network. So we have to keep those things in mind as well. But having said that, I used to say this 10 years ago, 9 years ago, whenever that was. And it is here now. And we have a short window of time in which to sort of transform.
Dr. Sikka, what has changed in the last 4 to 5 weeks, if I can put it that way, which is so dramatically different? Is something dramatically different? Because, I mean, AI is not new.
Yes.
We've been talking about it, but it seems like the pace has accelerated in the last 2 weeks. Is that correct?
It is. It is correct. The acceleration has been happening. Back in 2014, when I had started at Infosys, AlexNet had shot a couple of years before. AlexNet had beaten human performance on computer vision on ImageNet, and from that time onwards, transformers came around in 2017, 2018, and then the big models started to come. The ChatGPT was 3 years or so, 3.5 years ago. So there has been a continuous improvement. About 8 or 9 months ago, we saw the first reasoning models, O1, and then shortly after that, O3. And then one of the things that the big frontier model companies have done is integrated tools into the models. So within the chain of reasoning, they integrate tools. That's why software development becomes that much more powerful, is because tools like the shell, Python interpreters and compilers and other verification tools are all built inside the models themselves. And so that makes them much more powerful at creating correct code. And now, Anthropic launched this co-work thing, and Google has launched a bunch of things. Yesterday, Isomorphic launched a dramatically better approach towards the pharmaceutical drug discovery area. So yeah, there is no doubt that the pace of change is accelerating.
Pace of change. So there are these plugins, right, which you're talking about, the Anthropic, which happened, I think, last Tuesday, last week. I mean, basically, the general assumption is that Indian IT companies will integrate all this AI technology into an enterprise workflow, etc. So is that argument now on shaky ground? Because as you're saying, there are these plugins. But the pushback to even that is, well, you need plugins to plug in plugins, if I can put it that way, right? So that's my question. I mean, is the integration aspect of Indian IT there? What's your sense?
I think the prescriptive kinds of work, if a particular project or a particular service line is about work that can be repeated, that can be prescribed, such that people can be asked to do this, they can be trained to do this work. This kind of work can much more easily be done, using AI. This is already possible today, including complex kinds of transformation work, moving programs from one system to another, migrating, and things like that. A lot of this kind of integration work, writing code, glue code to connect systems and things like that, this can all be done much more easily using software, using AI. Can it be done 100% autonomously already? No, absolutely not. But people who know what they are doing can definitely see dramatic productivity improvement. So one could say that the gain in productivity because of using generative AI can be quite substantial.
Yeah.
At the same time, if people don't know the power of generative AI, if they don't have the fundamentals, they don't see that much gain from generative AI. So this is what Melanie Mitchell, who is one of the researchers in AI, called it the jagged frontier, that certain tasks, because of the nature of the task, don't see that much productivity gain. Certain people don't see that much productivity gain. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is he was a student with me at Stanford, and he's a genius. He rebuilt a site that earlier had been done by 15 people over 9 months. He rebuilt it himself in 14 days. So that's more than 100 times productivity improvement. I have seen examples of 20, 30x productivity gain and things like that. The important thing, Prashant, is that do we want to keep looking backwards? Do we want to keep looking at tasks that we already do? And do we want to limit ourselves to what we did in the past? Do we want to be afraid of the disruption and automation to the things that we did so far that brought us here? Or do we want to look at the opportunities of what are the new things that I can do with what we have in our hands? And I think, I focus much more on the latter. I have a small company, and life is a lot more interesting when you think about, my God, we have this incredible ability. What can I do with it? And I think when I look at it from that lens, it is incredibly exciting.
Dr. Sikka, sorry, this is we can have such an expansive conversation, but for now,
Yes.
we will have that. But I'm kind of bringing you back to some of the particulars.
And I will be in Delhi next week, for the AI summit.
And we can have that. We can have that expansive conversation then. I mean, if you have time, and hope to see you there, Dr. Sikka. So, if, as you said, productivity goes up this much, which means effort falls, right? 10x, 20x. So, which means what then? I mean, as for Indian IT services companies which are servicing US clients, clients will see, right? I mean, you are using this and effort is now down this much. Is this deflationary in a big way on pricing? IT companies we speak to here in India so far have held out saying that it's not deflationary. So far, we've not seen that. What's your sense?
I think we have to separate the potential, the promise, if you will, of this disruption from how it impacts in the here and now. In the here and now, you have particular projects that people are executing on, and if a client expects that you now do this project dramatically faster or cheaper or with less people or whatever, then that would impact the here and now. But that is something that takes time. That's what I meant by, depending on the service line, depending on the nature of the work, depending on the team that is involved, and things like that. So there is the fear in general of the potential of what this can do to knowledge work. But then there is the actual reality of creating an enterprise-ready offering that uses these new capabilities to deliver those. So there is a gap between them, and that gap, some of these services, there might be companies already offering new kinds of ways of doing the same services. And then, of course, you have much cheaper, much better alternatives available in legal services and many other areas. There are companies like that already. But then there are others where it might, take years for these new kinds of offerings to show up. So how much a particular services company is impacted by AI depends on how many of their service lines are being impacted by use of these or by alternate offerings that are much better than what they are doing or what the client's expectation is. I do see clients asking for discounts and all of that. There was a famous example of a large audit company that was asking for an AI discount on its own audits and so on. There was a report that I read about that. So there is that expectation that there is some productivity gain that is being baked into what you offer. But we have always dealt with that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry, it is not a simple black and white answer. In some cases, it might be something that people expect to happen today. In some cases, it might take years before you can deliver a transformed new kind of a service. And you have to see individual companies where they are at in that spectrum of disruption.